Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Luminous Youth for a Luminous Earth. I'm Erica, and today I'm chatting to one of my favourite people on this planet, Robin Grille. Thank you so much for coming in and spending time to share your wisdom with us today.
It's a real pleasure. It's great to see you again
Yes,
in this
yes,
virtual world. It's
I
been a little
know.
while, hasn't it, since
Thank you.
we crossed paths
Yes,
last time?
yes, in Byron Bay.
Yep.
So, there's so much I would love to um, get into. So I'm just going to jump into my first question.
Okay.
And it goes back to your first book. And it's something
Right.
that's really stuck with me because I think it helps us not only with our parenting, but also with explaining our own behaviors and when our own buttons are pressed. And that is the 5 rites of passage
Oh,
that you talk about. I know I'm going back in time.
let's start at the deep end of the pool.
that
Huh.
Yeah, and that's in your first book, Parenting for a Peaceful World, which is
Yeah.
just amazing, and I wish it came with every baby that was born because there's so much valuable information in it. But that was one of the things that really stood out for me. So I was just wondering if you could sort of briefly touch on that to whet people's appetites so that they can go and delve into that for themselves and maybe touch on stuff that might come up for them in their parenting.
Just real briefly, where those 5 rites of passage come from, that particular way to look through a lens at the first really key formative first 7 years of life in all our lives, really. Where that particular model comes from is from a tradition of the body psychotherapies, and I had learned that in my training as a psychotherapist first, and then what was fascinating to me is that all of the new research from the academic world um, that was looking at how we all develop as babies and little children. It slightly different language, but it was saying the same things that psychotherapists have been founding in the therapy room for decades and decades. So I took the best from those two worlds and found their midpoint where they agree, and that's where those 5 rites of passage come from, and they're quite distinct, and they're quite universal. If you have a human body, um, you know that we all know how different we all are and how differently all kids grow up and how many surprises there are. You anticipate something and they bewilder you with something else. However, at the same time, there's a uh, core rites of passage that we all pass through, and they all have quite a universal significance. That's what that talks about. So, do you want me to just name the 5?
Yeah, I'd love you to name them and maybe just touch on a little bit about each one would be really
Sure.
fantastic.
Okay. The first one we called the right to exist, and that begins from at the latest the 3rd trimester in the womb. It is just now understood that there's quite a lot of consciousness and a lot of emotional aliveness um, in the womb. At the latest by the 3rd trimester. So that rite of passage through that period and birth, the drama of birth,
Yeah.
the enormity of birth, and the perinatal period soon after birth, that huge window of bonding that happens when everyone is in a very heightened state. And so we call that the right to exist. And it's always hard to put these things in a nutshell, Erica.
I know.
But it's really like the deepest foundation of emotional intelligence. From it, we get our sense of, do we have a right to be here? Are we wanted?
Yes.
Which is what informs every other emotional intelligence, every other aspect of self-relationship and relationship with others.
Yes.
And as we move into babyhood, it's about the right to need. And the really the biggest drama then is about reaching out and having our needs met, being responded to. Our skin being held because we can't hold ourselves, we can't hold ourselves up, being comforted because self-comforting and self-soothing is pretty much a myth when we're, especially in young babyhood.
Yes.
There's very little aspects of that, like we suck our thumbs, and that's soothing. But you really can't expect a baby to learn self-soothing. That is an invention of modern Western parents. It's wishful thinking. So how well we fare through that is about how well our needs are met, and we get from that a very deep, long-lasting, unconscious sense of do I have a right to be needy, to have needs, and to reach out when I am. It is so fundamental in terms of we're creatures of relationship. We thrive through tribe.
Yeah.
Thrive through tribe.
Oh,
Put that on
great.
bumper sticker. That's a new bumper sticker.
I love it.
So then we move into this is remarkable. It's such a revolutionary time of life. And think about your own babies right now. That moment when they move from being, this helpless being just lying back to the discovery that they can, of their own steam, stand.
Wow.
And this comes from their own body. It's not just mummy, daddy. It's the revolution of that. Suddenly the world, I'm vertical, so the whole world did this.
Yeah.
Plus, when I want to go there, my legs can get me there, or I can crawl there. It's my own motility. And my God, up until now, everything used to happen to me. All of a sudden, I can make things happen. That is, that's explosive.
Yeah.
So with that comes,
Robin, you've just frozen for a moment.
game or
at explosive.
Yeah, it's a moment of explosive. It's ecstatic, actually.
Yes.
It's exhilarating. Over the top. But so we go from feeling magnificent to feeling terrified and sensitive and fragile. From 1 minute to the next. So it's a fragile time of, flipping and flopping from being a baby to toddler to back to baby, back to toddler. That's the stage we call the right to have support. Can we move through life? That's when we learn. Can we move through life under our own power and steam? But yet when we need support, is it okay to ask and to receive it and to enjoy it?
Yes.
And that is just a core theme of emotional intelligence that's fundamental to how we move in the world, even when we're in business at 40 years of age.
Yes.
So, all of these layers of emotional intelligence inform how we do our relationships with family, with lovers, with friends, with business partners, with the environment, with the non-human world.
Yeah.
That's how deep this is. Remind me about that later on, because I'd like to.
I will definitely.
Put a flag on that.
I have.
To give examples of what I mean by that.
Yes.
And then we move into a later stage of toddlerhood, which is, we call it the right to have freedom.
Yeah.
Which we start to become much more assertive, and we start to have a robustness emotionally that we can tolerate some conflict. And this is when you start to really say no to the world and to love saying no. If you remember your kiddies ever saying no to their most favorite thing, because they were just the saying no, there's something intrinsically delicious about it. It's like your belly's on fire.
Yeah.
To separate yourself from the world. I can do without you.
Yeah.
Go away. The good vibes sometimes come from the inside now. And you push parents away, and momentarily.
Yeah.
And all of those things need a different kind of respect now.
Yeah.
So how we combine, it's much more about boundaries now. as parents, we need to change gear now. We need to go from how we parented a baby, which is all yes, 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 because babies have zero tolerance for no.
Yeah.
They can't do no. There is no equipment for delay, for disappointment, for waiting. Babies can't do that because
Because
babies don't.
that's actually traumatic for their bodies, isn't it?
Yeah, you can say that because e- especially little baby, they don't have the equipment for imagining anything. So there's no future.
Mm.
So if they're lying there in a state of pleasure and fulfillment, that's really cool. But if they're lying there when the moment of need and hunger comes up, and mum doesn't come, or dad, or a familiar loved person doesn't come, that turns to despair, to terror, and to rage. Actually, very quickly. If you've seen a baby in rage, just the outrage, the absolute outrage, deep primal rage.
Yeah.
And all of that's okay, and every baby will go through that. Things happen.
Yeah.
It's called the great cosmic shit happens because it does. It's just that when that continues, when we are told to institute that for the baby's good, that is the cultural lie that we seem to be just trying to grow out of at the moment. Potentially, to particularly the more sensitive of babies, that rage will then turn to a kind of collapse and a dissociative state.
Yes.
There's just simply no capacity to keep on raging and calling for mum or dad.
Yeah.
If that happens repeatedly, then our bodies become expert at dissociating and or collapsing, giving up. Now, are you still there?
Yes.
Because our line just went good.
Yes.
And you don't want that to happen to your baby, that their little body becomes very good at going into a dissociated state, or a state of freezing. Now, with a lot of us adults, we have the remnants of that in our own bodies from all of the times that our parents left us there to cry alone, which is true for our generation.
Yes.
I have a very broad sense of what I mean by our generation. Those of us that are grown up and have children.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's still there, like when the times when we need each other, but we forget that we need each other. We don't reach out. We don't ask. The times when we, for instance, intellectualize a lot instead of feeling our feelings. When we rationalize things instead of feeling our feelings. When we get cut off at the neck and live in our heads. If those things are, everyone has that from time to time, but if those things are very habitual in our lives. If you live up in the stars a lot, up in the clouds a lot, la la la, here come the angels. I mean, the angels might come, but if you live there a lot, you get very ungrounded.
Yeah.
That potentially is how habituated your body is to living in that place. That had an early beginning in your life potentially.
Yes.
That's one example for how these things become part of both the wonderful things that happen and the painful, traumatic things that happen.
Yes.
In a normal family. I'm talking normal families. Normal, good families. Those things then get recorded in the body and become part of this thing that we call character or personality.
Yeah.
The learned and habituated behaviors and ways of relating to the world, they carry the footprints of very, very early experience. Things that we forget with our heads, but even though you've forgotten it, and even though it's very, very difficult to remember it as a movie in your head, there's body memory. Your body remembers all of it. Your body remembers all of it. And it's visible. That memory is visible through how we behave, how we think, the attitudes that we have. how we see the world, our perceptions. And so here's another example. You know, the coming back to that fourth rite of passage,
Yes.
the right to your freedom. You know, this requires a whole different kind of parenting now. We're changing gears from attachment to something to do with boundary, and something to do with allowing our children their right to go and explore the world, and sometimes get hurt a little bit and disappointed a little bit and find their own power that way. We need to find ways to step into conflict and disagreement with them, because that will happen every day. And what we're teaching here is how do loving people manage conflict? How do we manage even annoyance and anger in a way that produces love?
So important.
If you look around, most societies are atrocious at that.
Yes.
That shows you how damaged we are from this rite of passage. The world is still very, very poor. We're getting better at it, but it's intensely poor at how to manage conflict.
Yes.
If you ever see people, or if you know in yourself, if you find moments of managing conflict, even passionate disagreement, and then because of the conflict, not in spite of it, but because of it, you feel closer to the other person.
Yes.
That your heart opens up more, and you see something new that you haven't seen before, or
Yes.
you feel seen into in a new way. That's the kind of the healthy design of conflict. And we're supposed to learn the beginnings of that at this fourth rite of passage, and then more of that again in adolescence. And we don't. You know, we have what happens to the frightened parent or the overwhelmed parent is that, you know, when the child starts to really expand his territory or her territory and to become more defiant and assertive, there's the old authoritarian school of punishment, physical punishment, ignoring, shaming.
Yes.
Really toxic shaming. Bad boy, bad girl, naughty, terror. Most of the shaming isn't even in language, it's through the eyes, through the way
it is.
No? And they know. They know. They know what we're thinking about them.
Yes.
Immediately. Or what's the new thing, you know, now that we're new age parents and we don't smack our kids and we don't shame them and we don't ignore them and lock them in their rooms and give them timeouts, but we reward them. We promise them, you know, if you're good, you'll get a little piece of unhealthy, you know, sweets that will rot your teeth and make your behaviour really terrible for a few hours afterwards. You know, little gold stars or good boy, good girl. You know, we praise in that particular manipulative style. So, you know, really a lot of us have a very messy history around the flight to freedom. And I see in the larger world, in a collective sense, I see the legacy of that wounding. Do you know what? The biggest way that I see the legacy of that wounding is in the free market capitalist economy that is killing our planet today.
Yes.
And here's what I mean by that. This is a religion now around the world, so it's heretic if you should dare to dispute it. You know, the world considers this the obvious thing, that big business should be allowed to be free to do what it wants to do. It's called deregulation.
Yes.
This is what's called a free market. Don't impose any regulation on business. Don't impose any limitation on business. And so grown men and women, and it's usually men, will go into rage if you limit the freedom to just do whatever you flipping well like in business.
Yeah.
Now, the magical belief, the delusion, is that if you let business do whatever it flipping well wants, chop down a forest, charge whatever money they want, dredge the Barrier Reef, belch poisonous CO2 into the atmosphere, if you let business do what it wants, the market, there's this thing called the magical hand of the market, and it'll all even out in the end.
Yeah. Mm.
Because of natural competition, and if people don't want it, they won't buy it, blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't work. And we're killing the planet. We're killing it. We're shredding it.
Yes.
Because of this unhealthy relationship to freedom.
Yes.
That when someone says, don't do that, you go into fuck you mode.
Yes.
That's a lot of leftover, unresolved rage from when you were 3 or 4 years old.
Ah, yes.
We have today people that have the emotional age of 3 or 4 or 5,
yep.
sometimes of 14 or 13, money won't tell me what to do kind of stuff.
Yes.
That are running boardrooms.
Yeah.
But they aren't mental health people. They aren't, they are the normal people, good people. And they send their kids to school, and they live in the suburbs, and they give money to charity. I'm talking, this is normal.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not. Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think needs drawing attention to, is this is all seen as normal. Like the trauma and the disconnection is just seen as normal.
I call it the tyranny of normal.
Yeah.
Just what happens is, if it's normal because everyone's doing it,
yeah.
If we're going to be lazy about it, we tell ourselves, well, it's normal, everyone's doing it, therefore it must be okay.
Yeah.
Carry on business as usual.
Yeah.
There's a great fear at daring to defy the culture and go in a different direction.
Yes, I think there's a strong push now, isn't there, to question normal, and that we're seeing a lot more people questioning that, because it's clearly so obviously not working.
It's so obviously not working. We're not only killing the planet, but there's so much loneliness.
Yeah. Yeah.
So much heart, so much depression.
Yes.
There's an epidemic of diabetes. Epidemic of diabetes. If you hear endocrinologists speaking to each other at their conferences, they're using the E word. Millions of people with diabetes. And one of the root causes of that is that people weren't breastfed, or they weren't breastfed enough, which plays havoc with the digestive system, the immune system.
Yes, of course.
But it plays havoc emotionally as well. If there isn't enough of that oral pleasure at the attachment phase, the second, the right to need, that rite of passage.
Yes.
So we keep on sucking at life, and not only leaves us open to digestive issues later, but then that leaves you potentially vulnerable to all of the marketing and advertising for, eat more of this and eat more of that, and you'll be happy when you have the lollies, and you'll be happy when you have the, the candy bar, and and watch more TV and get fed by TV. The TV is the breast, the surrogate breast.
Yes.
And there's an industry at making people unwell.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like that's the importance.
There are. There's an interesting new term of cultural creation.
Yes, that's a brilliant film.
Go ahead.
A great film, The Cultural Creatives.
Yeah, and millions of cultural creatives
yes.
who are just opting for a life of learning a new lifestyle of health and sustainability, and basically saying, well, just because something is normal doesn't mean it's good.
Yes.
And so much of a lot of what's normal is wonderful, but so much of what's normal is deeply kind of pathological and deeply really symptomatic of very profound wounding at these early stages. And I should say there's all kinds of healing possible.
Yeah, there is.
It's just that before you can heal anything, you need to say, I'm wounded. You need to acknowledge that. You need to know it.
Yeah.
If your culture is saying to you, that's not a wound, that's something to be congratulated for. The fact that you hoard money and buy things you don't need and build a McMansion that could house 5 families and chop down every tree and pour concrete, we love you. We will give you love for that. That's not wounding. That's health.
mm.
So no, the only time that healing isn't possible is when you're in denial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of, um, obviously I've got 3 young children, so I see a lot of young children. And my intuitive feeling, I don't have any scientific backup, but my intuitive feeling is a lot of the kids coming through now are not going to be satisfied with that. There's a drive in them, and even there's a drive I feel like in a lot of teenagers where that's not fulfilling me. Like I feel unfulfilled by that frame of thought, and they're searching for something that's going to nourish them really and truly.
This is something that I did not write in my book, because in my book I only wrote the first 5 rites of passage, which is the core development, core emotional development. But I would one day like to say a lot more about the value of the teenage stage of development,
Yeah, I'd love you to talk a
because
little.
I think that there's evolutionary in terms of social evolution. Yeah, just briefly that I see the role that
Mm.
adolescence plays for the health of the larger tribe
Yes, it's
is that they are, for a few years they are given jet fuel, turbocharged, instinctively questioning. In fact, going further than questioning, challenging
yes,
the cultural norms.
yes,
Human beings and communities survive on this planet by creating a culture. Culture tends to help you survive certain situations, but then keeps you stuck if you're stuck with it. So that if culture doesn't continue to evolve, that becomes toxic,
mm.
and civilizations will eventually collapse.
Yes,
When culture doesn't change, the civilization will collapse, usually by destroying the environment around itself. The role of teenagers, more than anyone can do this, but there's something especially potent about teenagers. They're the ones that have the gall to say, we don't like what you're doing. And they must do that. They help the whole tribe to let go of old stuck
yes,
cultural blindness,
yes,
the tyranny of the normal. They attack the normal.
yes,
They must do that.
yes.
And throughout history, modern history, you'll notice that whenever a conservative government comes in to power, the first order of business is to silence the youth.
Yep.
They win the election, and on the very first morning, the first thing they say, we're going to crush student unions, or we're going to make students have to pay more money,
Mm.
so keep them in debt so they don't have time to protest.
Yes. Yep.
Something like that. The
Yep.
first order of business, or make them do NAPLAN tests in school.
Yeah.
First business is shut the youth down,
Yes.
because they are the health. They are the people that remove us from the old, stark, traditionalist, authoritarian suffocation.
Yeah.
So thank goodness for that. And, the reason why young people sort of have been given a bad name for violence
Mm.
is that when that energy, that healthy, beautiful energy of questioning and challenging and inventing the new, right? When that is attacked and crushed, that's when it becomes more poisonous and it becomes more embittered.
Mm.
Now, I think our line got cut off there. Hello.
Yeah, I could hear you though.
Hello?
You weren't moving, but I can hear you.
Did you hear all of that? Because
Yeah,
our
I
line
did.
got a bit stuck then.
Yes, I did.
Good. Okay, good. Good. So, yeah, that is one main healthy role that the stage of development of adolescence. That's we need these. We need the adolescents, and
We do.
it's not only up to them. I think it's an injustice to say, hey, you'll be the generation that's going to clean up our mess. That's bullshit. We need to we made the mess.
And I
You
loved
know,
what you said.
so
I heard an interview.
roll up the sleeves and get in there, but we also need to get out of their way because healthy teenagers.
I heard an interview with you, and you talked about saying sorry to the teenagers.
Yeah.
And I found that really touching how you talked about that. I think that could you share that again? I found that really touching and I think really important.
I feel that almost every day. I feel a real sense of horror, really. Um, I shake my head and I say, "What have we done? What have we done? Look at what we've done. Look at what we've done. We've so blindly amassed our own prosperity and cannibalized our children's future for that. What an atrocious thing that we've done. It is a form of cannibalism. Um, we're not eating their bodies, but we're yes, there is. There's no healing for that if the planet burns up.
Mm.
Um, the Cree North American, the native North Americans, the Cree people have a word, wetiko.
Wittical?
Wetiko. Wetiko. Wetiko is similar to cannibalism, is when you devour another person's resources, another person's ability to thrive.
Yes.
Take their livelihood from them. We've come close to doing that, and if we continue without changing fast enough, we and our parents have done this to our children and their children, and that is perfectly unacceptable. And I do feel sorry. Can I speak for other people in that? I don't know, but I just feel like a massive intergenerational apology on our knees is necessary. But necessary but insufficient. Necessary but insufficient. Insufficient. I think we also need to get in there and change stuff, change the conversation, change our behaviour, change what we do, and not to just leave it in the grim. In the I'm not. When I say sorry, by the way, that's not guilt. That's remorse. I don't like guilt. Guilt is very self-obsessed.
Yeah.
You're talking about guilt because everyone stands up and leaves the room. No one's interested. But we can have so much fun cleaning the planet up.
We
really, really can. And I think the opportunity that we have is that, yeah, it can be. It's the most unifying thing. It's the one thing that cuts across all of the illusion of tribal separation and the national patriotism and all that bullshit. There's a shared imperative right now that applies to every being on this planet. Clean up the mess, or it's not going to go on.
Yes.
And I'm just seeing a lot of community building, a lot of tribe building, a lot of beautiful. Like a renaissance of humanity based on a myriad projects that I couldn't possibly have time to tell you about, but I'm sure you know most of it, all of it. Replanting of entire forests, huge ones. Permaculturing in deserts that have no rain. Retooling technology so that it's entirely sustainable. Retooling the economy so that it's a circular economy.
Yes, you talked about
that. So
that.
Instead of mining the earth, we mine old stuff.
Yes.
And make.
You talked about that in Byron Bay, the cradle to cradle economy. I would love you to just share a little bit about that too, because that's the flip side of all of this damage that we've done, is that it's also a hugely exciting time to be alive. And to clean up this mess together and to empower our youth and listen to them, because they have a lot of the wisdom of how to do this. But that cradle-to-cradle economy I found hugely exciting.
Can I show you my chair?
Yeah, I know. Oh, yay! This is the chair.
I'm so proud of my chair. Hang on a minute. Can you see that? Hang on.
Yes.
Woohoo!
Wow.
That's my task chair, and I believe it might have been the first product that got the full cradle to cradle certification, and which means that over 95% of it needs to be completely recyclable, upcyclable, reusable, and even to begin with, it needs to be sourced maximum from already recycled materials.
Yes.
It also means that in the production story, that it needs to be fair all the way, so that there's no exploitation of labour. People are treated well and fairly, and maximum use of renewable energy and the building of it, and it's an international certification. And the circular economy is what we are. That's the imperative. That's what we must shift into. You realize then it's actually okay to have things. We'll always be a technological ape. And what a wonderful thing that is.
Yeah.
Look at this computer through which we're talking. But there's no reason why, when you think about it, this is insane. They call it the take, make, and discard economy. You rape something out of nature, you make something, and then you chuck it. That's normal, by the way. Isn't normal sick?
I know, it is. It
and
really is.
We think it has to be that way. I mean, it doesn't. No. Pardon?
It really is dysfunctional.
It's insane. It's insane. This is a lunatic asylum. It's crazy to live that way. So, no, I agree with you. I think this is a very exciting time from, every day there's new and exciting projects, new way of doing things, new way of treating, becoming basically harmonious with the non-human world, so that we become, truly a part of the ecology. That's happening, and it's a retooling of society, a reorganization of how we do relationship with each other. And early childhood is a big driver of that. One of the more powerful drivers of that, because when children's developmental needs are met according to that core biological stage that they're in, then all of these things are second nature. They're like a reflex. There's a difference between someone who says, I won't chop down that forest because I know that it's bad scientifically, and, or another person that says, I won't chop down that forest because when I cut down a tree, it makes me want to throw up. I can't bear it.
Yeah.
I can't bear it. I feel pain in my body when I see destruction. Who do you prefer? It's not even really the same result. So, harmonious relationship is not a philosophy. It's a neurology. It's the way that our very intestines can work. if we're nurtured the way that we were designed to be. Harmonious relationship by way of reflex, not just some trendy new idea that sits in the top kind of shelf of your head. So
yeah, I loved how you talk about parenting parents as being agents for positive social change and planetary healing, and that when we parent in this way, that we're actually reprogramming our future. So to sit and to really think about what kind of society you would like, and that we actually do have a lot of power in creating that. I find that really exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh God. I mean, you can, as a parent, you end up being, so I think it's impossible to separate parenting from politics.
Yes.
So even if you never think of politics, if you are responding to your child according, to the best of your ability, to the best of what's in your heart, to the best of what your life is supporting you, when you respond to your children's needs, that is a profound act of social activism, because an emotionally healthy person is far less, far less vulnerable to cultural inculcation, far less likely to react and act out violently, far less likely to be addictive towards consumerism or trends, a more free agent, and more connected individual. That it's like unties the shoelaces of culture without you ever going out into the street and marching and holding up a placard. So, the new approaches to parenting are profound. I mean, they bring they're cataclysmic, really, for the prevailing culture.
Yeah.
Really undoing the culture entirely, and creating a new one as we go.
Yes. Yes.
At the level of the gut and the neurology of the human being. Yeah.
So it's like rewiring humanity.
That's absolutely. What you're saying is factual. It's not even metaphorical. We are, well said. We are rewiring the neurology of humanity. We're also resetting the default of the brain chemistry and the gut chemistry. The lining of the gut, the immune system. The immune system goes hand in hand with psychology.
Yes.
That's the new. I didn't talk much about that in my book, but there's the gut is another brain, and it goes hand in hand with relationship, emotions.
That's fascinating.
So I did just very quickly. I did mention the fourth rite of passage in core emotional development. Should I say a word or two about it?
Yes, please.
We call it the right to love. From about age 4 to about 7, and those age boundaries are very, very blurry, right?
Yeah.
But at the very latest stages of a toddler moving into early childhood, there's a new drama that's unfolding bodily, which is the sensuality of the body. It's infantile sexuality in a sense. It's not like adult sexuality, but the body becomes so sensual, and our way of reaching out and loving is very total body embrace. We become fragile to new things in that time of shame about our bodies, about our look, about our and about our we begin to explore our bodies and touch ourselves and be curious about other people's bodies. That's a time that is vulnerable to a lot of shaming and fear, but it forms the deepest layer of adult sexuality. It's a time to be really very sensitive to the exploratory and passionately loving nature of the child at that age. There's a primitive morality that is emerging then too. We are a very primitive morality, where things are good or things are bad. There's that on-off binary switch, and that we tend to see the world a lot that way. Mummy's good or mummy's bad right now. Or am I good or am I bad? It's real black and white terms. And very easy to exploit that if you're a fundamentalist. And so the nuance hasn't arrived, the colour hasn't arrived in terms of our view of value. And look at how normal, the thing that we call normal, becomes the symptom that runs through society, because the fundamentalists in our communities still think that way. Either you're with me or against me.
Yeah.
Either this is good or it's bad.
Yeah.
The bad things should be punished, the good things should be rewarded. Now you're talking about the core anatomy of religion in its fundamentalist form. And that's not just a set of beliefs. If there's one thing that I discovered very, very consistently in all of the research that I did for my first book, Parenting for a Peaceful World, when I looked at how cultures have evolved in all over the world over millennia, based on how children are raised, child rearing customs. One of the patterns that I found that repeats almost perfectly each time, the more religious fundamentalist the society is, the more rigid in its religious views, the more it will be a net exporter of violence.
Mm.
The more patriarchal a culture is, the more violent it becomes, not only against itself, but against its neighbours.
Mm.
And now that we're a globalised society, the implications of this are very, very sobering, where we have to think we really can't afford for there to be a religious fundamentalist and patriarchal society anywhere. Not only because what happens to the children in those societies, they're all far more punitive towards children.
Yeah.
But pretty quickly that violence will spill out everywhere else. And you can do that as an experiment. Look at any culture.
Yeah.
If it's heavily patriarchal, religious fundamentalist, people are going to get hurt in some scary ways. And that fundamentalist view of the world, right and wrong, good and bad, black and white, that's kind of a stuckness in a perceptual lock, a perceptual stuckness, a failure to. It's an arrest of the maturation, a further maturation process that happens because of pretty heavy wounding at that time of development. Between 4 and 7, children, what happens is as their sexuality emerges, if there are adults in the vicinity that have bad boundaries sexually and that have sexual disorders themselves, that's usually when the child will start to become molested, invaded, inappropriately touched, or on the other side, that's where a massive amount of punishment and shaming comes in for that infantile kind of pre-sexual behaviour. And that does a lot of damage.
Yeah.
A lot of damage.
Yeah.
But it's not considered pathological, the results of that damage. It's considered religion or something normal. Often.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. That's really, really interesting to look upon all of those 5 stages within ourselves, because I think that's where changing the way parenting begins is seeing and healing ourselves, because like you said earlier, is then that becomes second nature. And one of the other places that we haven't really touched on today, but we spend a lot of our years in, is our education system. And that's a whole nother broad topic. But what I'd love to ask, that I'm asking all of the beautiful people that I chat to, is, do you have a vision or some ideas on what a positive and like a positive way to educate our youth is? What's your vision? What are your ideas on that?
Yeah, well, I'll say that the very, very exciting thing about this topic is that, it's anything but my vision. This is being done increasingly a lot in so many places around the world. And I actually wrote a chapter for a book called Social Ecology. I called it The School of World Peace.
Oh,
And I looked at progressive schools in around Australia, New Zealand, Germany, United States, Canada, Israel, Japan, many places around the world. There's an emerging conviction. And what's really cool is how these things evolve spontaneously around the world in so many countries, and they don't know about each other, and they all have a different name for this same thing that they're all doing. It's a real kind of hundredth monkey thing, you
mm,
know. It's spine tingling. Like the free schools in Japan or the democratic schools in Israel, they all thought that they were alone. And then they stood up and realized everyone's doing this. Not everyone. A lot of people are doing this around the world, which is basically a movement towards adapting school, uh, the learning journey to the individualness of the child and not the other way around.
yes.
Fundamental power shift. Um, So the job of the school really needs to be, whether it's a school, a community school, with a campus that kids go to, or whether it's a homeschool, or all kinds of brilliant combinations of both and in between. The school environment needs to be asking the child regularly, what do you love? And how do we help you discover the things that you love? And, there needs to be a lot of observation. And when you don't know what you love and you're going through a period of not knowing, which is normal, here's a menu. Try all kinds of stuff. Let's both watch it together. And wow, this is when you get really. I notice how you get so much more absorbed when you're doing this thing and when you're doing it that way. So that kids not only have, we're all born with gifts and passions that are peculiar to who we are. We also have very different learning profiles that kids learn in different ways. Straight away when you sit everybody in a row and get everyone to do the same stuff, straight away you have just betrayed and lost probably conservatively 50% of the kids in the class.
Yeah, conservative.
Some like it that way, a lot don't, and some will hate it with a passion. Uh, so the adaptation to the learning journey, to the passion of the child, and the learning style of the child, and that works just immeasurably well. It works so beautifully. In all the schools that I studied this way, they all said, well, not only we seem to do really well academically, so-called academically.
Yeah.
I'm starting to feel like an allergy to that word, but for how narrow it is, how hopelessly, tragically narrow that word is. But not only we do well academically, you give us your NAPLAN, we'll do it, man. We'll shred it.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens is that school violence reduces, and in some cases it plummets. It plummets. If you want kids to stop beating each other up, just don't beat them up. Don't shame them. And coercion in education is a kind of violence. You will now sit down. You will now do what it is that I ask you to do. You can, very, very nice teachers can do that. Very sweetheart, darling teachers. No, but now you need to sit down and do this. This is what we're all doing now. It is doing a violence to the child. And make no mistake, that doesn't come free of charge. There will be a cost.
Yes.
The betrayal will find a way to act out against the child, against the system, against other people, against the smaller child. I think the greatest cost isn't just the violence, it's the loss of self, it's the loss of the gift, the loss of the wonder that we all have inside us to offer our society, our world. It's heartbreaking, really, seeing how many people there are functioning. You know, we say we're coping, we say deal with it, we deal with. That's not living. That dealing with is not living. It is not. It's getting through. So how many people go to a job every day and suffer? I'm bored a lot of the time, or even if I'm not all that bored, this isn't me, you know. I had a dream. I had a, you know, or perhaps I don't even know my dream, but I can feel there's something inside me that longs to hone a gift or two that I came with, and I'm not using it this lifetime. I have no words for how just intolerable I think that is. You know, I guess maybe because I went to the same school as everyone, and I was entirely lost, and I found my early 20s to be a kind of torture, really, because I was, jumping from one random job to another, desperately miserable and unhappy, and sort of self-loathing because going to work, making some money, coming home, and not really being alive. I cannot hate you enough to wish that upon you.
Yeah.
And then when I think that there are entire armies of children that grow up that way, and entire armies of men and women that go to work, trundle home. When work isn't love, bullshit. We don't need that. We don't need that. That's what I want for school. That's what school should be. And I want to use the word should. Should. That's what school should be. If it's not that, it's failing.
Yes.
And if you're getting high marks, please don't bother me with that information. Have your kids found who they are and what they love? And are you helping them to pursue that and to give it a shape?
Yes.
And right there, I think there's a beautiful place for teachers. I'd like more teachers. I'd like mentors, actually.
Yeah.
Mentorial teachers who sit with a child and say, you're doing great, and I've got some other questions that you didn't even think of asking.
Yeah.
Other things you could explore.
Sharing what they love.
Oh yeah.
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 Yeah, so it just spills over naturally. It's not like a training ground where you go and learn to be a teacher. It's just a sharing of what you love and inspiring people in your gift, because I think that's what happens, especially in those teenage and 20s, is you're really passionate about something. Like you there's something that you really love, and I really feel like that's your gift to the world. That's your part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And when that's dumbed down with stuff that doesn't matter to you, and you're made to push that to the back because it's not quite important, you're not being who you are. You're not. That's that gift lost.
That's an incredibly bitter experience. I think it's a kind of violence.
Yes.
It's a brand of violence. I actually call that educational abuse.
Yes.
It's an institutional educational abuse. You can't blame teachers for it. This is done at a national level. It's a political driving force.
Yes.
But what happens is that a lot of young people, teenagers, will become violent as a result of that, of not having been helped to find who they are. Because it's a life is boring, and you don't want to work at things that you don't have a love for, and then people mark you and compare you to others, and shame arises in that situation. So we become violent. Actually, we become either violent to the society that we find no excitement for, and we don't have a stake in, or we act out against ourselves. Violence against the self. What is that? Cutting of your body, smoking cigarettes, taking drugs, alcohol. And if you're in Australia, by the way, then you start the alcohol, and then you're likely to find people that just love you for it. Yay, you threw up yesterday and you passed out, you're paralytic. We love you for it.
Yeah.
You're our heroes, and then the cycle goes around and around. Violence is either acted out or acted in. And that's why that's why when schools turn towards the children's passion and they're committed to that, violence in the school drops. It is in fact used. Democratic styles of education are now used as treatments for social violence.
Great.
I could tell you about a school in Tel Aviv in Israel where it was the most violent school in the city, and they were going to shut it down. And what they did instead, they fired all the teachers, and they handed the high school to the democratic education experts, and they transformed the school. It did take them 2 years, but they transformed it. The kids that were previously beating up the teachers as well as each other and breaking all the equipment, they were painting beautiful murals on the walls. Yeah. Some of the older kids were taking the keys to the high school home with them at night. They were in charge of the school. And they ended the violence in that school. You know, hint, hint.
Yeah.
Hint, hint. This is how you end human violence. This is how you end war.
Yes. And that is how important our job is as parents and caretakers and educators. That's how important it is. That's how much power is in these jobs. And
yeah, that's the more you think about this, the more you realize that the job of a parent as well as a teacher is this is the oh my god job. Oh my god, future depends on it. We're the drivers collectively of how the society is going to operate.
Yes.
As we move forward. So, hello, this is a profession.
It is, and thank you. Like I'm so thankful to people like you, but I'm only just going to talk to you right now. I'm thankful that you feel all of this stuff because you're not coming just from a scientific, factual-based place. I can see that you feel these things and you have the courage to go there anyway. And I'm in awe and I'm so thankful to have people like yourself who choose to do that because it really is changing our paradigm. It's books and it's interviews and it's being out there and feeling these painful things and then asking how we can change them that is inspiring others to do the same and growing. And I'm so thankful to you for being one of those people.
I appreciate it a lot. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and I mean, and it's heartwarming for me too. I see the work that you do and your community, and to me that feels very, very personally nourishing. You know, I'm instantly happier the more that I see pockets of families and communities that are really, really, really changing the paradigm and putting their heart and soul into changing the paradigm, as I know that you do, and your partner and your friends, your community, that radiates, that feeds us all.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you also for that. And I just want to say quickly something that occurred to me. The one thing that's potentially really, really scary about all of this information and this kind of dialogue that you and I have just had, most people feel caught out and trapped. In that, oh my God, I was parenting my children this way until I read your book or this other person's book, and oh my God, I've damaged my child. The D word, it's absolutely devastating.
Yes. I felt
I've done this
that.
damage, or I read the book and I did it anyhow. All of that goes on. I mean, no matter what, we still disappoint our children from time to time. We will, no matter how much therapy or personal growth you've done. And do you think that I live up to the book that I wrote? Are you kidding me? The book that I wrote isn't about what I've accomplished. It's about what I do my best to try to to live to, with intermittent triumphs and failures
Yes.
that I'm proud of and ashamed of. So it's important to talk about healing, to at least mention its possibility, at the very, very least.
Yes.
So people aren't left kind of suspended in paralyzed panic.
Yeah.
It's not just what we do wrong to our kids. It's not. It's not. It's what we do afterwards, and what communities do afterwards with each other. All right?
Yes.
I mean, one way that I put it is the difference between hurt and damage is everyone gets hurt. And the truth is we'll hurt our children sometimes even. And damage is when nobody cares and you're in denial and it didn't happen or you deserved it. When afterwards our children can say, hey, that hurt, or hey, I was sad then, or hey, I'm mad at you now, or, when they have a right to express their protest, they're validated, just given the respect. They right themselves. Massively.
Yes.
So there's this beautiful aspect to the system that it's not just up to the mum and dad. You don't have that much power. You don't. It's up to a collective. And you can take the best parent that was ever born and put them in a place where there's nowhere near enough support and there's too much strain and too much being asked of the parent. And that parent will fuck it up. And you can take a very dysfunctional parent and put them in a new environment where they're being very loved, very supported, and getting enough of the help and having some of their own healing, and they will blossom. Blossom. You will see some miracles happening. So it's not the parents. It's a kind of, we all need each other. We need each other, and there's a kind of, the story doesn't end at the moment of getting it right or getting it wrong. There's no full stop there. You keep turning the page. We're still writing the story. And if there's something, gosh, I sent you to a terrible school and here you are. Well, we'll talk about how that made us both feel. That's part of the healing. And then also, what can we build that's new? I'm in my 50s, I still want to go to a school that is so different to the school that I was trapped in when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Bloody oath. There's so many things I want to learn, but I'm just determined that I want learning to be quite delicious. And at the moment it starts to feel too much of it like a drag, and I feel like, yeah, right there I've taken a wrong turn.
Yeah.
I'm trying to learn how to grow veggies and herbs. I'm not willing to show you a photograph of my garden yet. It was going so well, and then this rat came and destroyed all of it. Absolutely, just devastated everything we've planted. And so I'm in school for that. We're absolutely in school. I feel like a primary school kid trying to learn, how to proceed there, and but I definitely want that to be a really yummy process of learning, teamwork. So school's not over.
Yeah.
Here's a secret, which is a funny thing to say, because if it's a secret, I wouldn't be telling you. Yes, but don't tell anyone else. Keep this to yourself. Schools should be more like a family, and families should be more like schools. In the healthy sense of that word.
Yeah,
We got these very strict kind of boundaries, School is where you go to get serious, and home is where you come to, play and hang out. And school, education works to the degree that it's playful. And how come we're not continuing to learn things at home together?
Yeah.
A lot of the best learning that we do, we don't sit down, oh, now let's learn this.
Yeah.
We're just doing things together or talking together, and suddenly you realize you've learned a pile of stuff.
Yeah.
But you were just in the flow. You were just getting lost into what you naturally wanted to do next.
Yes.
Like say you cook together and you're telling a story. Oh yeah, if you do it like this, it works better and blah blah blah. And suddenly it's a cooking class, but don't call it that.
Yeah.
Don't call it that.
Yes, it's like
So,
you're always learning, really. Like you never ever stop learning.
I guess not. No, I guess not. And yeah, I mean that's such a cool way to be alive.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cheers, by the way. What are you drinking?
Yeah. I'm drinking cacao. Sorry, we missed your tea. You froze. What are you drinking?
Earl Grey tea.
Earl Grey tea. But you do touch me, and I'm sure you're going to touch everyone who listens, and I'm thankful. Thank you.
It's been a great pleasure. And you want to talk to me again, and I'll probably just say, yeah.
Great.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Excellent.
Yeah,
I'll take
enjoyed talking with you, Erica. It's so nice to see you again, and carry on with all this great stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, you too, Robin. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
You too. Bye.